Look, I know there's a lot of angst in the Pac-12 footprint about what is happening with the Pac-12 conference. Where will your teams be playing? The Pac-12 has been through some of this before over the years. The Pac-12 has undergone different basically, there have been a number of teams that have come into the conference. It started as the Pac-8 conference. But if you really look at the history of the Pac-12 conference, it was founded in downtown Portland all those years ago. I think it was 1915. I don't know anybody was there. But in 1915, there was a meeting at the Imperial Hotel in downtown Portland, and this thing, found some life. I have talked about sort of the birth of the Pac-12 conference, but we want to go to a historian when we talk about the original, Pac-12 conference. And I want to go to Mark Schipper, who runs a website called fifthdowncollegefootball.com, and he's joining us now. Mark, let's talk some history, man. I've been reading your posts, and there's a ton of history here. Let's go back. Like, what is it that makes the history of the Pac-12 interesting to you?
Well, the Pac-12 is an interesting league because it's always kind of had 1 foot in and 1 foot out of major college football, which we're seeing today. So it's always been known as an academically prestigious league. It's always been known as kind of a rule-following league. And there's always been a very interesting dynamic between its schools because there's an unusual mix between big urban population centers and rural universities. And over the years, that's caused conflicts. I would argue that what's going on today is in part related to the situation of each of the universities.
Pacific Coast Conference, founded in 1915, downtown Portland, Imperial Hotel, doesn't exist anymore. I got this neighbor who's an older guy. He's a retiree, and he says, "Oh yeah, I remember the hotel. I remember when it was then." I said, this is a story that has a real Portland flavor to it, and really is of the Pacific Northwest. But when you look at sort of the original schools, you had Idaho in there, you had Montana in there, USC was in there, UCLA was in there, original members, and certainly Washington State, Oregon State, and Oregon. But, this is a conference that I think has undergone some changes over the years, Mark. How nervous should people be right now?
I think everyone's nervous right now. I think individual schools and leagues are nervous. I think fans are nervous because they're seeing the game that they love being broken up in kind of violent ways and reorganized. So the Pac-12 should be nervous, but I like the guy they have in charge, George Kliavkoff. I think had he not been brought in after the torpedoes had kind of hit the hull, I think he could have captained this ship to safer waters. But I think he's a great guy to have in charge now. If the Pac-12 can keep itself together and get through the next sort of period before college football finishes its reorganization, I think they'll be okay. But there's going to be a fight, and I think the Big 12, Pac-12, and then potentially this alliance redux with the ACC from the Pacific Coast to the Atlantic Coast, whatever happens there is going to determine what goes on afterward.
Yeah, I know that, there's this saying, you'd rather have loved and lost than never loved at all. But, they got burned by the Big Ten Conference, and here comes another alliance. I don't blame people for going, oh, no, I don't want another one of those. But an alliance between the ACC and the Pac-12 I think is really interesting. Doesn't have great geography, but I think it has great potential.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. When you look at the map of college football and what's happening now between the leagues, what you're really looking at, and I encourage people to find maps. There's a bunch of them on Twitter with the conferences showing in their alignments. What you're really looking at is a philosophical approach to college football. Leagues are pairing off in the way they've always approached college football. The Big Ten and Pac-12 have gone together many times. If you look at the SEC, it's a super region. All those schools have always had the same outlook on college football, which is just win it all, baby, and do whatever it takes to do it. The ACC and the Pac-12, what the remnants of it, have a lot of philosophical similarities in terms of high-quality universities, caring about athletics outside of football and men's basketball. And they got a bunch of just great brand names. So even if it's just for a interim period to get through a certain phase, I do agree with you that the Pac-12 and ACC is a really interesting pairing.
Mark Schipper is our guest, Fifth Down College Football. What have you learned in doing the research that you have done in the last few years as part of your website?
Well, what we're talking about, one of the most fascinating things to me is the thesis I have that the modern conference commissioner, the Kliavkoffs of the world, the Kevin Warrens, the Sankeys, was actually born in sort of the fiery death of the PCC, which is the direct ancestor of the Pac-12. Prior to that happening, conference commissioners were sheriffs, policemen, internal affairs liaisons between leagues and the NCAA. They were hired to investigate their bosses' businesses, essentially. And so you can see quickly, as college football grew as a business, how that became a terrible conflict of interest. You brought a guy in to essentially find out what you're doing wrong and report you for it. So when the PCC blew up, it had a ton to do with the zealousness of the commissioner, which the league had told him to do, to his credit. He did what the PCC told him to do, but he did it too well. And they had an incredible scandal in the late 1950s. The whole thing burned to the ground. And Phoenix-like from the ashes, the new commissioner rose. They brought in Tom Hamilton, who was a star at Navy on Navy's 1926 national title team. And they didn't even call him a commissioner. They called him an executive. And they told him explicitly, you are not here to investigate our programs. You're here to promote our programs, promote our league, and you're here to help us generate revenue with our athletics, specifically football. So you can see the direct line from that PCC to Pac-12 to Larry Scott to George Kliavkoff. That's a direct line, and it runs through the Pacific League.
What happens to the role of a conference commissioner as this thing evolves into two mega conferences or a partnership with the ACC and the Pac-12? How necessary is it for you to have a conference commissioner?
Yeah, interesting question. Right now, it's definitely necessary. You need a point man. You need a guy who's getting everybody together on the same page, deciding what assets you have, what allied strategy you want to embark on, and then he's got to be the guy, the general, leading it. So right now, I'd call it extremely important. As we go forward, it could turn out there's going to be some type of czar with sort of lieutenant-like underlings, different kind of positions. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I know right now, you want a conference commissioner who's a connected deal maker and someone who's very savvy about the sports media entertainment marketplace because, as you said many times in all your great pieces on this, television is driving this thing right now. Media.
Give me an idea because, when we go back into like some of the research over the history of this conference, it didn't used to be about TV, but it suddenly it is, and it's about 7:30 kickoffs, and it's about now alliances and forget geography. You'll fly 2,000 miles to put on a game because we're in an entertainment world now. Yeah, absolutely. It's a major change. I think people, TV, really, the NCAA took control of TV in 1952. Prior to that, University of Pennsylvania and Notre Dame had been the only real TV players, and they deeply resented the NCAA taking the rights away and centralizing TV. From that point, it's continued to grow. I sort of set a clock running on the era we're in now at two different places. One is 1984, the deregulation of TV in the Supreme Court. And number two, well, from that point on, it's basically when television consolidated control of college football's regular season, the conference networks grew up, et cetera. And then 1998 at the BCS. And leading to the BCS was the Bowl Coalition in the early 90s and the Bowl Alliance. And then the BCS. And for me, the BCS was television's crowbar into the postseason. They jacked open that door and they got in. And they bought up the postseason. So now they have the regular season. Now they have the postseason. When the college football playoff came along, I look at that as checkmate for TV. Now they have everything, and the schools need every penny they can get from them. So we're in a situation now where it's what you just said. It's a full-bore entertainment property. We're talking to Mark Schipper. Fifth Down College Football is his website. I really encourage you to check that out. He does a really good job getting on the road, You were out on the road in the last year. I know we had you on the show, and you were out kind of touring the country. What did you find out there? Give me a couple of the highlights, because not everybody gets to be out and go see games and tailgate and kind of get the flavor of so many college towns.
Yeah, you know what the biggest overall thing is, this country loves college football. We see a lot of stuff in popular media and in the culture that suggests there's a lot of divisions and difficulties everywhere, and there are those things. But there are certain things we agree on, and boy, do we love them. And college football, from Seattle to Eugene to Los Angeles to the SEC to the Northeast, college football has a special connection to this country, which is my thesis in the book I'm working on about college football, is that it is inseparable from American history and culture. So everywhere you go in this country, basically, and it fades in and out in certain places and all of that, but essentially it's a really loved game, and people are really passionate about it. It's almost like it comes down family lines kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I've been to like a spring game at LSU, and it's a cultural experience, right? Like the band comes in and people are friendly. Where did you find the friendliest fans? Because I know fans probably were happy to see you everywhere, Mark, but where did you find the friendliest fans?
The friendliest fans, I didn't have any bad experiences. I was in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge people are great, very welcoming, very warm. I had fun in Tallahassee at Florida State. I had a great time at UCLA outside the Rose Bowl. A lot of people, they've seen the empty stadiums and the difficulties UCLA has. It's a special case for certain. UCLA has a great tailgating scene out in front of the Rose Bowl, and a lot of people who you welcome in and welcome you in and have a good time. I should say Fayetteville, Arkansas. Fayetteville, Arkansas, I'll make that the last one. Fayetteville, Arkansas was a sensational time. Wonderful people. They love the Hogs. It's an institution in that state. And Saturday, I was there, fortunately, when they upset Texas at home and stormed the field. It was the second week of my Odyssey last fall. And that was one of the great experiences I had in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
The changes we're watching in college football, my fear is that we are looking at a system that is being changed not for the better. Help put that to rest. Can this end up good for college football, everything we're seeing, Mark?
It can end up good, but I'm not going to lie about things being lost. But things have been being lost for a long time now, and nothing is going to stay the same forever. I tell people all the time, if I had an opportunity and I could wind college football back, I would run the sequence between 1980, I wasn't even born yet, through 1997, which was the end of the end of the old system, which we call bowls and polls. You played your bowl games. They took a poll January 2nd and crowned a national champion. So that's gone. It's a different world, but it's still college football. We're still going to have a lot of the rivalries. We're still going to have Saturday. And who knows what happens with this playoff. A lot of people are down on an expanded playoff in postseason. It could save the Bowls. The Bowls are in big, big trouble right now. And it could end up being a good thing. So I encourage people to stick with it and keep watching your teams and your games and see how it goes. You might like it more than you think you're going to.
Give me an idea. You say maybe it'll save the Bowls. Give me kind of a theory that works out in, because I like that.
Yeah, well, the Bowls. It's interesting. The series that led. There's always parallels in college football. The series that led to the BCS was the Bowls dying in about 1990. The Bowls were going to drop dead. Their TV ratings were down. Their payouts were down. They started taking on sponsors, and they'd lost their cachet. TV was begging for a playoff. So that's how we got going to the BCS. And the BCS revived the postseason. Not for long. We had to go to the playoff. But I look at it like this. Here's the example I use. If they incorporate the Bowls into the postseason and we're playing knockout games in the Bowls rather than just some random venue or on campus the whole time, we're going to renew interest in those bowl games. If last year's Peach Bowl between Michigan State and Pitt with Kenny Walker and Pitt's great quarterback drafted in the first round, I'm trying to blank on his name right now, if they're playing in that game and that is a win, or go home game. I think that Peach Bowl brings in millions more viewers. It was one of the lowest rated New Year's Six games on the docket last year. I think millions more people watch that game because both those guys play, their best players play, the award winners are in the game, and the winner matters. So I think you have to look at it like that going forward. This idea of expensive exhibitions that count for nothing, essentially, and I say that with all due respect. I love the bowl games, but they don't really count for anything other than a win in the win column or a loss. They need to be brought back to life in some way. So hopefully that's a hypothesis on how that can happen.
I like that. All right, Mark Schipper, you can catch him at Fifth Down College Football. I appreciate you joining us. Good stuff, man.
All right, John, appreciate you. Talk soon.
There he is. Check out his website. Does a good job.